Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the Dallas Cowboys at the Green Bay Packers in their Week 14 matchup played December 13th, 2015. We're going to go over every possession and the stats and give our breakdown and analysis. So to start this game off, the Packers would get the ball first, and they would end up punting after 5 plays. So now the Cowboys would take over on their own 24 after the punt, and they would end up moving the ball up to the 38, and then Darren McFadden ran 50 yards for the first down all the way to the red zone, the Green Bay 12-yard line, and then Matt Castle hit Jason Witten for a 10-yard pass that made it first and goal on the 2. So right there, they're first and goal on the 2. And then on third and goal from the 3, Matt Castle was intercepted by Sam Shields in the end zone. Sam Shields kneed on it for the touchback, and so now the Packers, they ended up shutting them down in the red zone with the turnover, and they take over on their own 20. So now Green Bay would move up to midfield on this possession. They got down into Dallas territory. They would get into the red zone, but then some penalties would push them back. And then on 2nd and 20 from the Dallas 28, Rodgers went to Eddie Lacy, picked up 24 yards and a first down. Again in the red zone, this one at the 4-yard line for first and goal. And they got up to the 1-yard line, but on third and goal, Starks scored a touchdown, but they reviewed it and they ruled that he did not get in the end zone. So now it's 4th and goal, and the Packers elected to go for it. Rodgers tried to sneak it in, but he was stopped for no gain, and so the Packers turned the ball over on downs. So both teams making trips into the red zone on their first possessions of this game, and neither team coming away with any points, as the first quarter had saw just 2 possessions, and we were only a minute left in the first quarter as we now had the third possession of the quarter, as the Cowboys would take over after the turnover on downs on their own 1-yard line, backed up against their own end zone. They would bring the first quarter to a close after 2 plays. They opened up the second quarter, and on the second play of the second quarter, they would end up punting the ball from their own 10-yard line. So they went 3 and out on this possession, and now Green Bay would get the ball for the second time in this game, and they had it on the Dallas 48 to start the possessions. They're already in Dallas territory, and they were able to get down into the red zone. And then on 3rd and 4 from the 13, Aaron Rodgers went to James Starks, and he scored on a 13-yard touchdown. Mason Crosby added the extra point, and it was now 7-0 as the Packers put the first points on the scoreboard with less than 10 minutes left before halftime. The Cowboys would then punt after 6 plays on their next possession. Now Green Bay would take over after the punt on their own 19-yard line. They got up to midfield, and they moved into Dallas territory and then into the red zone. And it was a 1st and 10 on the 17. Rodgers went to John Kuhn. He picked up 14 yards and a first down at the 3-yard line. Then on 2nd and goal from the 3, Aaron Rodgers went to Richard Rodgers. A 3-yard touchdown pass. Mason Crosby added the extra point, and it was 14-0 Packers over the Cowboys with less than 3 minutes left before halftime. The Cowboys would then be held to a 3 and out on their next possession. The Packers would punt after 5 plays on their next possession, and the Cowboys would end up bringing the first half to a close with the ball still in their own territory. So that would do it for the first half. Then in the second half, to start things out, the Cowboys would get the ball first. They would go 3 and out on their first possession. The Packers would then punt the ball after 6 plays on their first possession of the second half. And now the Cowboys would get the ball for the second time here in the third quarter. They would start off with it on their own 20. Then on 2nd and 4 from the 26, Darren McFadden ran 45 yards as he ran another big run, as he had a 50-yard run earlier. But now it was a first down at the Green Bay 29. Then Robert Turbin ran 22 yards for a first down in the red zone at the Green Bay 7. Turbin then took it into the end zone with a 7-yard touchdown run. Dan Bailey added the extra point, and the Cowboys were now on the board about midway through the third with 8.5 minutes still left to play in the third quarter with the score Green Bay 14, Dallas 7. The Packers would then end up punting after 6 plays on their next possession, but then the Cowboys were held to a 3 and out On the possession that followed, they would hold the Packers to a 3-and-out on their next possession, and now the Cowboys would take over with about a minute and a half left in the third, and they would bring the third quarter to a close as they were at their own 36. And on the first play of the fourth quarter, Matt Castle was sacked by Clay Matthews, and out would come the punting unit. So they would punt the ball, and now the Packers would take over, but they would go 3-and-out on the next possession. Then the Cowboys would be held to a 3-and-out as well, and now Green Bay would take over after the punt on their own 16 with just over 11 minutes left to play in this game. So now Green Bay would move the ball up to midfield and into Dallas territory, and they would get into the red zone. But then after losing 5 yards on first down, that set up a 2nd and 15, then a holding offensive pass interference would push them back even further to the 30. So now it was 2nd and 25, and James Starks ran it in 30 yards for the touchdown. Mason Crosby added the extra point, and it was 21-7. Packers back up by 2 scores with less than 5 minutes left to play in this game. So now the Cowboys would take over after the touchback on the kickoff on their own 20, and they started moving up towards midfield, but they were faced with a 4th and 4 on their own 38, down by 2 scores with just over 3 minutes left to play. They elected to go for it, and an incomplete pass would turn the ball over on downs. So now the Packers would take over on the Dallas 38, already in field goal range, and they would get the ball down into the red zone on 2nd and 12 from the 25. Eddie Lacy ripped a 24-yard run, nearly scored the touchdown, but he would get a touchdown on the next play on 1st and goal from the 1-yard touchdown run. Mason Crosby added the extra point, and it was now 28-7 Packers over the Cowboys with less than 3 minutes left to play, up by 3 scores. The Cowboys would get the ball on their own 20 after the touchback on the kickoff, and then they ended up turning the ball over on downs with a couple of incomplete passes after Elliott had sacked Castle on a 2nd down from the 40, but then 2 incomplete passes, they turned it over on downs, and now the Packers, all that was left to do was for Tolzien to take a couple knees in the victory formation, as the Packers end up winning this one in impressive fashion. It was a tight game early on, but in the end the Packers end up winning this one in somewhat of a blowout, and they improved their record to 9-4 on the season. They're now up by 1 game in the NFC North over the Vikings. So they take the lead in their division as the Vikings had lost to the Cardinals on Thursday Night Football. Now the Packers get this win at home against the Cowboys. They're now 5-2 at Lambeau Field this season. Like I said, 9-4 on the year. The Cowboys now fall to 4-9 on the season, and that pretty much ends their hopes of possibly making a run for the East, as they started the day just a game out, but with the Redskins and the Eagles both winning, now the Cowboys look like they're pretty much done, although they're not exactly mathematically excluded. But all season long they've been in this position of not really having much of a chance, and they still are alive in the hunt there in the East. Is who knows who's going to come away with that one. But in the North, you got quite the physical battle coming down to the wire between the Green Bay Packers and the Vikings. It'll be interesting to see when they hook up what happens. But in this game, the Packers, I said they started kind of slow. Of course, they came up big with that turnover in the red zone with the interception by Sam Shields to stop the Cowboys from scoring on their first possession. And then they come all the way down to the 1-yard line, but don't come away with any points on their first possession. Otherwise, this would have been even more of a rout if they had scored on that first possession there, where they ended up turning the ball over on downs. But once they got going, they ended up booking into this game with touchdowns, a pair of touchdowns in the second quarter and a pair of touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And then you had that one touchdown in the third by the Cowboys. But Green Bay looking pretty impressive, as they were really very productive on the ground in this game, is they almost had 200-yard rushers. But in this game, Aaron Rodgers, 22 for 35, 218 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Eddie Lacy had a big game, 24 carries for 124 yards and a touchdown. James Starks, 11 carries for 71 yards and a touchdown. Starks had 32 yards off of 4 receptions and a receiving touchdown as well, as he ended up with 103 total yards on the game. And Randall Cobb, 8 receptions for 81 yards. James Jones, 4 receptions for 49 yards. Ed Lacy also had a 24-yard reception, which gave him 148 total yards on the day. And then for the Cowboys, Matt Castle, 13 of 29, 114 passing yards, no touchdowns, and 1 interception as he continues to struggle. Darren McFadden, 9 carries for 111 yards. Of course, he had 94 yards off of just 2 carries. So he had a couple of big runs in this game. And Robert Turman, 7 carries for 51 yards and a touchdown. So they were able to get some production out of that ground game, but they didn't really stick to the ground game. And also, once they fell behind, they got in a position where they had to throw the ball. But if only Romo was around, it'd be interesting to see where the Cowboys would be at. So they do have a good offensive line, but we look at the receiving for the Cowboys. Jason Witten, the tight end, was their leading receiver with 5 receptions for 40 yards. And then the kickers in this game, and for the Green Bay Packers, Mason Crosby, 4 for 4 on the extra points, did not attempt a field goal. Dan Bailey, 1 for 1 on the extra points, did not attempt a field goal as well. And the defense for Green Bay, Clay Matthews had a sack, as did Elliott, and Sam Shields with that interception. And for the Cowboys, Greg Hardy had a sack, Lawrence had a sack as well. They look at the team stats: 29 first downs for the Packers, 11 first downs for the Cowboys. On third down, the Packers 7 of 14, 50% conversion rate on third down. They went for it once on fourth, did not convert. The Cowboys just 1 for 11 on third down, just 9% converted. They went for it twice on fourth, did not convert either. Total net yards in this game, 435 for the Packers, 270 for the Cowboys. And on the ground, the Packers netted 230 yards, and the Cowboys 171. And then we look at the passing yards in this game, 205 for Green Bay, allowing 2 sacks, as Rodgers was sacked twice, losing 13 yards. And for the Cowboys, 99 net passing yards, as Castle was sacked twice, losing 15 yards. Penalties in this game: 8 penalties against the Packers for 69 penalty yards, 6 penalties against the Cowboys for 30 penalty yards. And the Packers did have a fumble, but they recovered it. And then we look at the red zone: 4 for 5 for Green Bay, 80% in the red zone, 1 for 2 for Dallas, just 50%. Time of possession: 37 minutes, 48 seconds for the Packers, 22 minutes, 11 and 12 seconds for the Cowboys. So the Packers almost doubled the time of possession. And when you look at the production by both teams on the ground, you would have swore that was the passing yards. That's what you would think going in. That would be the production. But both teams just heavily going to the run. Of course, it's that time of year. Once it gets cold, the temperatures drop. You got to have a ground game, because the passing game isn't going to be as productive, especially up there in the frozen tundra of Green Bay. But the Packers committing to that run and coming up big, and this is what they needed. Really, they've been struggling on offense as of late, but now winning their second straight game, they take the lead over the Vikings by a game with 3 games left to play. And with the emergence of this running game, their running game finally getting into gear, something that they've been kind of struggling with all year long. This will bring balance to the offense and should help them down the stretch, as we've got nothing but cold weather football left to play in this season. It's just 3 games left in December and into January, and the playoffs start. And the Packers, if they can keep running the ball the way they ran it in this game, then they should be able to have success going down the stretch and into the postseason. But we shall see how that develops. Well, let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It's greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and had a great weekend and enjoyed all the sports.